Shabbat Shalom. I want to let you into a little secret about my family, which is that during the COVID lockdown, we watched every single Marvel movie in order, sometimes 2 or 3 movies a day. It was quite embarrassing. But when life had stopped and there was not much to do and there were not many people to see, our friends became the Marvel universe. They were the stories that became our stories. And this week I want to talk to you a little bit about stories. We live in a world where stories are more powerful than ever. And when I think of stories, I think of the stories that the Marvel characters told us in these times where they were pretty much our only friends. Over the past decade, millions of people have connected with the Marvel characters and its journeys. But even within this shared universe, these stories that many of us know, fans often find themselves split. In fact, I think my house is split. Team Iron Man or Team Captain America, depending on whose perspective you might align with. This divide, a simple one, a sort of silly one, shows us just how deeply stories can influence and even separate us. But what if we use the power of stories not to divide, but to unite? This was something that always confused me about Captain America and Iron Man. Why is this team separating instead of staying together? We tell stories for countless reasons. Stories make us human, and we, as humans, are the only being that we know of that can tell stories. Stories connect us to our past and launch us into our future. They help others understand who we are and help us understand who we can be. Stories help us search for purpose and allow us to seek connections with others. Stories preserve, they make us laugh, they help us transmit pride, they help us build a world of meaning. Stories are even the backbone of our religion. Our Torah was passed down orally, our rabbinic text passed down orally before it was ever written. But stories can also deepen a separation in our identities, assigning us to different religions, political or ideological groups that can divide us, causing irreparable chasms. Today, it's so easy to forget that the origins and the beauty of a story are there in exchange for the anger we can feel when a story is told about somebody not like us or someone with a different perspective or an idea. Every current event or news event is told as a story from a perspective that sometimes we agree with and sometimes we don't. And we're inundated with these stories and perspectives many times a day, day after day. We see this play out in the story of the Avengers, as a team of people who once worked together under the leadership of both Captain America and Iron Man separated. They began to fight against each other instead of uniting under their common goal of creating a better world. Elie Wiesel once wrote, "God created humans because God loves stories." At our Jewish core, we know the power of stories. We read them from the Torah each week, and we teach them to our kids from a very young age. So what happens when we tell similar stories from different perspectives? Do we separate from each other because we have different views? Do we create splits and splinters among our communities? It's easy to distance us from each other because of the perspectives that stories are told in. This week we began reading Devarim, the book of the Torah that's a reflection of Moshe's life told from his perspective. Because it's told from his perspective, the stories sometimes look a little different or maybe seem to us out of order than when they were presented in other parts of our Torah. We see this almost immediately in our Torah portion, when the story of the Israelite spies checking in on the land of Canaan is retold. It was first told in the book of Bamidbar, and there, the story of the spies is told from a third-person perspective. God instructs Moshe to send spies to the land of Canaan. The spies report back about a land flowing with milk and honey, but then they also go on to describe its powerful inhabitants and fortified cities, which ends up terrifying the Israelites, leading them to wish to return to Egypt. Despite Caleb and Joshua's attempts to encourage the people, God declares that this faithless generation must wander in the desert for 40 years before the next generation can enter the land of Canaan. Now I'm going to retell you the story as it's told in Parshat Devarim. This week, Moshe retells the story from a first-person perspective, stating that the Israelites asked to see Canaan. The spies saw a good land, they didn't mention its inhabitants, and they all agreed on what they saw. Yet, the end is similar. The Israelites still refuse to enter Canaan, leading to God's decree that they must wander for 40 years. The same story is told differently, and the implications remain the same. Our commentators and rabbinic texts try to figure out what we might learn from the difference in these stories in Bamidbar and Devarim. Rashi harmonizes the two texts by saying that God never commanded the spies to be sent. God just agreed to the Israelite request to check out the land. So the story was told from two perspectives. In Bamidbar, the spies told the story, and in Devarim, it was God's response to the request of the spies. Ramban agrees that God did not actually command the spies to check out the land of Canaan. But once the Israelites asked to go, God took an active part in sending the spies by commanding how many should be sent and specifying the spy that goes from each tribe. Both commentators point to the difference in perspective as the main reason the stories are different in the two books. The commentators focus on the perspectives of the spies and of God, and the story in Devarim told by Moshe. A midrash wonders why the Israelites decided to embark on the journey in the first place, if the commentators tell us that it wasn't commanded by God. The rabbis debate whether the Israelites wanted to make a military and strategic plan for when they enter the land of Israel, or possibly they were motivated by a lack of faith in God's promise to bring them to a good land, so they wanted to go themselves and verify the goodness. The rabbis decide that God did not know the spies' innovations, the Israelite motivations, so therefore God couldn't command the spies in visiting Canaan. So let's take a step back. In essence, I just told you 5 stories, but they were all the same story. We got a story in Parshat Bamidbar from an outside perspective. We got a story in Devarim from Moshe's perspective. We have some commentators on the stories from Rashi, who says, yeah, I agree, there's 2 stories. From Ramban, who tries to harmonize both stories. And then we have the Midrash, who says, let's back up, let's figure out what the motivations are, and then maybe we can figure out why there's 2 stories. This is pretty common in our tradition, to give us different perspectives to one story. As I mentioned, the origin of our tradition was orally transmitted. So the different perspectives is inherent to our core text and shows us how stories were told by our ancestors. In our case this week, I don't really think any one story provides a satisfying answer. A teacher of mine, Dr. Sarah Wolf, says, these 2 divergent stories cannot definitively tell us who played what role in this disastrous event in the Israelites' history. Yet they can nonetheless teach us an important lesson about how even our most cherished and trusted leaders might be influenced by what they want us to remember, or what they want their followers to remember in their narration of these events. Storytelling can never be objective. There can never be a right or a wrong story. And that's exactly what makes stories so beautiful, unique, and powerful. It's our job to recognize that we have the skills to hear stories from multiple different perspectives and to learn from them. We have the responsibility to not end a story once the perspective that we disagree with is told. We must continue listening and telling to come to a better understanding of each other. Telling and listening to stories can push us to the edges of our comfort zones and into new territories of growth, perspective, and understanding. So here's what I think about the two tellings of the stories of the spies. Why should we just accept one story? Surely not every single Israelite thought the spies were horrible people who convinced an entire population to abandon their escape from slavery. We need these two tellings to teach us that no one version of a story is ever 100% correct, and that is okay. It's okay to listen to different perspectives, to struggle internally and externally about what is right and what is wrong. It's okay to disagree with one commentator and prefer another. That is why we have both options. The Torah teaches us to be better people because it teaches us to see the truth in different narratives, to hold the nuance that multiple narratives can have. Just as the Marvel movies give us different perspectives on the same events, our tradition offers multiple tellings of the same stories. This week's Torah portion reminds us that no one perspective holds all truth. Whether we side with Iron Man or Captain America, or prefer one version of the spy story over another, we're called to listen, to learn, and to grow from the diversity of narratives. The beauty of storytelling lies in its ability to challenge us and to expand our understanding. So let's commit to hearing each other's stories, especially those that we might not initially agree with. Because in embracing the complexity of multiple perspectives, we not only enrich our own lives, but strengthen our bonds to each other. Shabbat Shalom.